Good afternoon. The hearing will begin shortly. May I remind you to check your mobile phones and any other electrical equipment you have with you are on silent mode. Members of the public and reporters in the hearing room are not permitted to use any electronic devices during the hearing. If you wish to do this, you can do so in the annex. And no food or drink may be consumed in the hearing room except for the water provided. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
Sir, you will recall that just before lunch, the question of the date of Charlie Rowley's move to Amesbury.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And the answer with which I have been helpfully provided is it was the 18th of May of 2018. And the reference for that is paragraph 151 of DCI Phil Murphy's witness statement.
Well spotted. Thank you very much indeed.
Not spotted by me, but well spotted.
Whoever did it, thank you.
Commander Murphy, before lunch we had discussed those two interviews in August of 2018.
Yes.
Then there was a break, a sort of gap, and you mentioned preparation for coronial proceedings and so on, and we looked at the interview in February 2019. And as we indicated before we broke, there was then one final interview, was there not, in July 2019, which was of a different nature because rather than it being a sort of question and answer session, the police officers arrived at that interview with a draft statement and read it out to Mr. Rowley and asked if he was happy with it.
Correct.
So if we could go to that, please. It's INQ 005692. Thank you. We see the date at the top, which is the 15th of July, 2019.
Yes.
And in fact, this appears to have taken place at Mr. Rowley's home address.
Yes.
And we can see in that first chunk that VN 102 explains the purpose of the exercise. It is a reference to the coroner's inquest, and Charlie is told that the statement is going to be read out, and he will then have an opportunity to comment on what has been said. Before we get into it, could I ask, is this a standard process?
It certainly is not an unusual process for witnesses that for example, in Charlie's case, that we've considered vulnerable, or where there were a number of issues over time with an account. So the statement would be drafted, and then, as you'll see here on tape, they'll go through the process, because his status hasn't changed throughout the inquiry. He still remains, well, in this case, it was an intimidated witness. And so, for consistency purposes, it would be best practice to go through this with his statement.
All right. So you will recall when we looked at the statement, and the statement we looked at the beginning is the statement which is, we will now see being finalised. There were those three sections, were there not? The final one being the passage which deals with how, when Charlie found the bottle.
Yes.
So if we could go to page 7 within this document, please.
In the interview?
Yes, I'm sorry. If we go to page 7 in this interview,
Yes, certainly.
we will pick up. So in the transcript on the screen, we will pick up that part of this interview where the officers are reading out to him that particular section of his statement. And I'll read it. We see at the bottom then 1311. That's it. The officer says, "The final page, Charlie," and then he's reading, "I do know that I ended up in Salisbury District Hospital. As best as I can remember, it was likely I found the perfume bottle on one of 2 occasions. I believe I was on my own when I found the item. I think it was just in a street somewhere, either in Salisbury or Amesbury. I honestly cannot remember whereabouts it was. I recall picking up a package off the floor on my way to Boots, the chemist, in Stonehenge Walk, Amesbury. It may just have been on the street, but I cannot say exactly. It would have more than likely been in Amesbury, but I don't recall taking anything back to the flat. When I go to the chemist, I usually take one of 2 routes. The first is either down by the fire station and then down the track, or down the main road past the co-op. When I found it, I think I put it in my pocket. I know that it had been in a sealed container. I recall that I sort of found it on the street, on the floor. I also recall picking up a package from the charity bins behind cash converters in Salisbury. A lot of the time I go to a car park in Salisbury behind cash converters, and it's a charity shop place. It's the far end near the pub. There's usually a couple of wheelie bins at the very end. It's the back end of the charity shop. There are bins down there, and I find quite a lot of things in there. I may have picked something out of there. I just go every now and again. I don't go every day, but probably when I stay at Dawn's. I may have picked up the perfume box from there the day before. I do not have a recollection of finding the perfume box, but it's just a possibility. It was a black boxed thing and packaged in a sealed unit with a designer label on it. It had a clear plastic front exposing the bottle in it, and a pump attachment, although I'm not 100% sure that there was see-through plastic. It might have been all cardboard. The box was about 3 to 3.5 inches wide and about half an inch thick. Inside the box, the container was sealed with thick plastic wrapping. The white push-down dispenser was within the box. It was also in a sealed unit. I have not seen that kind of thick plastic anywhere else before. And then the officers say, and that is the statement that we've printed and I've just read out now. So obviously most of the passage I've just read, do we understand that to have been the prepared statement?
Yes.
And then if we can turn over the page, we see Charlie's response. He says, "Yeah, well, that all sounds about right. The fact about the Amesbury, me finding it there, because I'd say I'm 99% sure it's Salisbury I found it and not Amesbury. I don't know why I had a memory of picking it up in a street in Amesbury, but I think on the way to the chemist, it must have fell out of my pocket and me picking it up and putting it back in my coat pocket. That's how I thought I picked it up there." And the officers say, "Right, okay." Well, he says, "I think that's what happened." The officer says, "Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good you've remembered that and shared with us, okay." So that, we there see the, as it were, the final stage of Mr. Rowley adding a level of confidence about which of the 2 alternatives it was. Just to take you through the last page or so, the next section, in fact, goes back to the events on the Saturday morning, but it is worth noting as we go down that the officers ask him to clarify whether the bath that Dawn got into had water in it or not.
Yes.
And Charlie is quite clear that there was no water in the bath. That doesn't seem to have found its way into Charlie's actual statement, and it is potentially important, is it not?
Yes, but I believe that is accurate. There was no water in the bath. I think
Yes,
she just climbed into the dry bath.
But that's at least one place where we find that evidence.
Yes.
And if we can go over to the next page, please, so page 10. Mm-hmm. We can see at the top the officers say, in relation to the final paragraph, what percentage did you say you were sure? 90. And Charlie goes back and says 99% sure, I'd say. And again, he picks up. He says, I can remember thinking I found it in Amesbury, because I can remember picking it up. But I remember literally picking it up because it had fallen out of my pocket, I believe, thinking back. I remember finding it in Salisbury. And at the time, that was all I could find, so I put it in my coat pocket. It stayed there for some time until I got back to Amesbury, put it on the kitchen table, kitchen work surface, and that's that, really. The officer says, where in Salisbury do you think, Charlie? He says, it's in the car park on Brown Street, charity bin by the pub. And then the officer says, Charlie, is this a memory you have vividly in your memory? And Charlie says, yeah, well, or is this something that's been assisted by what you've read in the press and things? And Charlie says, no, it's what it says bought, but I think it must be brought. I've brought back over and over the time. It's the course of events that took place. And the officer says, okay, that's fine. So just that last exchange, we now have a 99% vivid memory.
Yes.
He's brought back over time. What's your reflection on that, Colin?
If you take, I think, Charlie's evidence in the round in all of his interviews and that final position, whilst I think Charlie genuinely believes that 99% is accurate, I still believe that at the end of this process we're in a position where there's it's difficult to rely on too much that's in Charlie's recollection as a result of the story we've seen develop over time with him.
Yes.
Of course, we can't dismiss it, sir, but it is, I find, very difficult to rely upon that as an absolute version of what happened.
All right. I'm going to move on from the interview process, but sticking with the question of where the bottle was left, stroke where it was found. While we've gone through a process that took a year, and certainly
Yes.
in its early stages, several weeks. While that was going on, were officers making inquiries around that issue informed by what Charlie was saying?
Yes, so a number of inquiries were taking place. So, for example, we were checking, sir, about bin emptying, about CCTV inquiries to try and track Charlie's movements, and obviously throughout the Operation Katerba investigation, sir, still trying to piece together any opportunities we had to track the movements of our main subjects of interest.
Also, as a result of the later evidence that Charlie was giving about the Brown Street car park, were inquiries made at charity shops in that area?
Yes, they were, yes.
Including the Cancer Research Shop?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you about those inquiries because we will hear evidence, first-hand evidence about those matters later on this afternoon. But there were also inquiries made, not just at the Cancer Research Shop, but the Bernardo's shop.
Yes.
Could we have on screen, please, INQ 000726? Was this a statement taken from someone called Alison Wright, who was, I think, certainly worked at the Bernardo's shop in Catherine Street?
Yes.
And if we can see the date is the 28th of December 2018.
Yes.
And if we could go over to the second page, please. She refers, does she not, to an understanding that Charlie and or Dawn may have bought a blanket from her shop on the 29th of June. I think we may have heard about that from a different member of her staff.
Yes.
But I'm going to read a section from page 2, starting I regularly see. She says, I regularly see people looking through our bins. Some months before the incident in June, I had a volunteer who arrived at the store one morning at around 7:15. He rang me to ask if I could open the back doors to let him in. As I opened the door, I could hear him chatting to someone. I asked who he was speaking to. He told me there was someone within the large Veolia industrial waste bin we have at the back of the store. I approached this person and told them that they were welcome to look through the bin, but they needed to ensure that they left the area as clean as when they arrived. The person was a man, he was friendly. I recognised him as being a regular and one of the many who looked in our bins. He was friendly, so I left him to it. I now know this to have been Charlie Rowley. The donation process is quite simple. If someone leaves items unattended outside of our store, we cannot put them out for sale. Those are disposed of in the bins. However, this process has only been adopted since July 2018. Prior to this, we would accept all donations. Once we received donations, anonymous or otherwise, we sort through the items. With particular reference to perfumes and cosmetics, we don't sell used or opened cosmetics or perfumes. These are disposed of in our bins. Perfumes and cosmetics must be sealed and tamper-proof. If they're not, we wouldn't sell them. Therefore, we are unable to sample any item which we sell. I can confirm that I've never seen either Charlie Rowley or Dawn Sturgess with an item of cosmetics or a perfume bottle. I never saw Charlie taking any specific items out of the bins and have no reason to believe that either Charlie or Dawn obtained any perfume from either my shop or the bin belonging to the shop. And then she mentions the fact that she hasn't been given her bin back.
Yes.
So just a couple of points from that, Karen Murphy. First of all, we saw, as we were going through the interview transcripts, that the Bernardo's on Catherine Street was one of the other places that Charlie said he went to look in bins. This would appear to be consistent with that.
Absolutely.
And secondly, as far as what Ms. Wright says about perfume and cosmetics and not taking boxes which have been opened, was what she said consistent with evidence that you obtained from other shops?
Yes, absolutely. It seems to be a common theme, actually, with charity shops not taking perfume and cosmetics in that state.
I mean, I suppose it's an open question whether the box as we know it would have ranked as an opened box or a closed box.
I agree, yes.
So one step was evidence from charity shops. You've also mentioned CCTV, and we'll look at some specifics in a moment, but I think it's apparent from all the evidence we've heard that there was an awful lot of time spent looking, for various reasons, at CCTV footage from Salisbury over those few months in 2018.
Yes, definitely.
And it may be that, well, was it the case that one of the things you were looking for was movements and activity of Charlie Rowley?
Yes.
And we saw in the interview transcripts Charlie giving an account that his bin dipping, if I can put it that way, was focused on just a few bins, the charity shop bins in the Brown Street car park and maybe one or two others.
Yes.
But I think he actually at one point said he didn't just look in ordinary street bins. What was the sort of evidence of the general trawl of CCTV footage insofar as it relates to that question?
So it did appear that Charlie indeed bin dipped in Brown Street car park, but also that he undertook that activity in other places around the town centre as well, more broadly, including potentially sometimes outside shops in the high street if material was there. And then historically, on the 11th of March, obviously, there was a cordon in place around the park, and there are some bins at the back of the shops where the Scripples were found unwell, and Charlie had in fact tried to enter that cordon at that moment in time as well.
Right. Well, we'll come back to that in a moment. Could I ask you first about some particular footage, or at least some stills of some footage relating back to the Brown Street car park on the 4th of March, so a date we're very familiar with.
Yes.
The date on which the Scripples were poisoned. For these purposes, could we go, please, to the graphics pack, INQ 00518, page 74, first of all. Just to get our bearings, Commander Murphy, if we could look, first of all, at the map on the left-hand side.
Yes.
There's a helpful box showing us where the Brown Street car park is.
Yes.
And those numbers 1 and 2, do they indicate the camera that we should be interested in?
Yes. And they're the pictures on the right-hand side are numbered to be from that camera. So.
But they're both from the same camera?
Yes.
We'll look at the pictures in a minute. But it's pointing down the car park.
Yes.
And is this right, that on the right-hand side of the shot from the camera, not always seen, but on the right-hand side, is the back of the shops fronting onto Catherine Street.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, on the right-hand side of the stills.
Yes, sir. So if you see, in fact, looking at the top picture,
Yep.
you'll see, and the bottom one, you'll see just in the top right-hand corner of the picture, that's the Cloisters pub. So that's the edge of the pub where we saw the bins earlier. And then if you turned right, in fact, you could just see the wheelie bin near where the white box is. But and to the right of that is where the charity shops run alongside as well.
So if we want to orientate it on if we go back to the map for a moment, if we could zoom in on the car park part of the map, we see the camera pointing down the length of the car park.
Yes.
I think the Cloisters pub is the word which has the in it. The building which has the in it.
That's correct.
And just above it, and just set back a bit to the left, is the run of shops fronting onto Catherine Street.
Yes.
Just before we come back to the car park, this will be relevant to the statement we look at later. The Mall, the George Mall or Mall, is that on the left-hand side, to the left of Catherine Street and sort of south of New Canal Road?
Yes, it is. Yes.
There are various entrances to it.
Yes, there are. Yes.
Right. So if we come back to the Brown Street car park and to those photos on the right-hand side, if we could just first of all enlarge the two larger photos. What do we see in those photos, noting that the time is 10 to 4 on the afternoon of the 4th of March?
So this is Charlie Rowley. In the top image, we see Charlie Rowley in the small white box there. That's near to where the bins are at the back of the charity shop. And the arrow is pointing in the direction that he is walking. And at the other end of that arrow, less than a minute later, you'll see another picture of Charlie Rowley. In the CCTV, he moves off slightly, but going to his original accommodation in March where he was staying, which is around the corner.
Yeah. And if we look then at the bottom two photographs, these are enlargements of the top two.
Yes.
And what can you tell us about those?
So this is Charlie wearing a jacket, and I believe a jacket actually we became familiar with as a result of the examinations in the house, but also carrying a black bin liner. It's on this day that I believe Charlie was bin dipping in the town centre.
That's a deduction, is it?
So yes.
Or is it because he's been other photographs actually show him at bins?
It's because he's carrying the black bin
Because he's
liner. So
carrying a liner.
that's often the image of him doing his bin dipping.
Right.
So he's in the Brown Street car park with a black bin bag.
Yes.
Within a few hours of the time that we know Petrov and Bosharov were walking around Salisbury.
Correct.
And we'll come back to this when they might have themselves been in the Brown Street car park.
Yes.
This I'm calling it footage, although we're looking at stills. This can't answer for us, can it? The question of whether either Petrov and Bosharov or Charlie Rowley, or indeed all three of them, had anything to do with those bins on that day.
No.
And why is that?
It's not been possible to track them. Two cameras were not working effectively that covered the entrance from the street side of this car park. So this is the only camera we have. And as you see, the camera wasn't positioned at the time on the bins, so just across the car park. So all this really can tell is that Charlie is out and about walking around the town, and as you heard, sir, my assessment, searching through bins, and the bin liner carries the content of those bins, I believe, on the afternoon of Sunday, 4th of March.
Just so there's no mystery about this, Commander, I think what you're saying is that if we look at those two larger photos, that the bins are just off to the right.
Yes.
We can't see them, or at
No,
least we
that's
can't
correct.
see them in enough.
Yes.
Enough of them to see whether people are coming and going to them.
Yes.
And if we could just, to cover this point off, go over to page 75, please. The photo on the top left is the one we've just been looking at.
Yes.
We don't need to zoom in on it, but if we could look at the picture on the bottom right,
Yes.
it's got a dotted line down the middle.
Yes.
Is that a representation of how far the camera was, or what the camera was covering on the afternoon of the 4th of March?
Yes. So the left-hand side of that is the image just about that we can see for the right-hand side of the top left picture, if that makes sense. So the picture we looked at earlier, which had Charlie with a purple arrow, the left-hand box is where the angle is of the camera. And you can see by the night time, on this particular night at least, and I think it is the 5th of March, the next day, it's moved over to the right so you can actually see the back of the pub and the bins.
So when the camera is panning at its widest,
Yes.
we can see with the sort of left half of that photo, it does cover the bins.
Yes.
Had it been set that way on the 4th, we would have been able to answer the question of who approached it that afternoon.
Yes.
But as a matter of history, it wasn't.
Correct.
So those two photographs, bottom right with the dotted line down the middle, they are from the same camera on the same occasion?
Same camera, sir, but the next day in the evening.
Oh, yes, next day.
To demonstrate, if you like, when they zoom the camera in and move the angle slightly, that you can see those bins quite clearly.
I follow that, but they're the same cameras on and the same occasion as each other.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
That's it.
They've just put a line down the middle to demonstrate the angle on the day before.
I think, in fact, Commander Murphy, if we look at the top right-hand photograph, that is, in fact, a single
Yes.
Oh, I see, with its dotted line.
Yes.
with the dotted line, and it's been enlarged and sort of made, fancied up a bit. At the
Thank
bottom.
you. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So we can compare the far left-hand photograph, which is the extent to which the camera was panned out on the 4th, and the far right-hand one, which is the wider angle that was,
On the 5th.
put back to the next day.
Yes.
But in any event, the point is, it wasn't set like that on the 4th, so we can't get a photographic answer of who went to the bin.
Correct.
But coming back to the 4th of March, you've given your general point, which is that the possibility that you entertain with that picture of him there on the afternoon of the 4th of March with a bin bag is that he may have been generally bin dipping that afternoon.
Yes.
If we could just go back in the graphics pack to page 57, please. This is the map we looked at, Commander Murphy, when we were talking about the missing 33 minutes with Petrov and Bosherov.
Yes.
And of course, Brown Street car park is over sort of towards the top on the right there. Going back to that, the first of those two questions or issues that I identified right at the beginning, is there any more you wanted to say about where Petrov and Bosherov the sort of consideration that was given to this in Operation Katerva, where they might have left the bottle?
Yes, thank you. So the 33 minutes were clearly the most significant period of time during their short period of time in Salisbury, where we were concerned that they would have had the opportunity to discard the bottle, sir. And you've heard that there are many hypotheses for where they may have been, but I think important to remember that during the time period of the investigation that I was considering this area, actually we still not sighted on what the Novichok might be, what container it was in, or had any further information in relation to that whatsoever. But on it being found by Charlie and subsequently then recovered from Muggleton Road, it has allowed us to try and pull those two things together and try and understand with greater detail where perhaps Petrov and Bosherov were, and that Charlie was out that day, and as you've heard, my assessment being that he was out searching through some bins that day. I believe, and this is simply my assessment of all of the information available to me at the time and since, is that Petrov and Bosherov, during that 33 minutes, either deposited the Novichok, potentially having resealed it, as we've heard in other evidence, either in the area contained within this map, but again, in an as yet unknown location, or specifically in those cancer research bins in Brown Street car park. I'm afraid I have nothing to point towards Petrov and Bosherov being in any of those specific locations, but generally in this area, certainly. In order to make it back to camera number 14, you see in the middle of your picture there, 33 minutes later, having deposited the Novichok...
Well, it's not 33 minutes later from Brown Street, but anyway,
no, absolutely,
within the overall 30 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I appreciate the clarity. So in that 33 minutes where they were off camera, time enough to walk to Brown Street car park, and then be seen on number 14.
I see.
But equally, they could potentially have deposited that Novichok at any point during.
Well, there must be
during-
hundreds of bins.
Absolutely, sir.
But
Absolutely.
that's no answer to the question.
And and it's my assessment then, sir, that Charlie Rowley was likely bin dipping on that day and has recovered it on that day. In getting to that conclusion, clearly we considered lots of other information regarding Charlie's general conduct and behaviour in relation to bin dipping, but also the frequency of the emptying of bins, both the general roadside bins in Salisbury, but also the commercial waste that you might find in car parks and other areas. So it seemed most likely to me that any deposited bottle was unlikely to last a prolonged period of time and was likely to have been found close to, certainly within a period of a few days at least, from when Petrov and Bosharov were in that area more generally.
I see.
Well, thank you, Commander. Just sticking with the CCTV with one last point, notwithstanding, you've provided us with your assessment about the likelihood of a March retrieval.
Yes.
But of course, we've heard Charlie Rowley's evidence that he thinks he got it much later than that, a few days before the 30th of June. And one of the considerations there is his evidence about wearing a coat.
Yes.
And we do have some actual footage from the same camera that we've just been looking at of Charlie Rowley in the Brown Street car park, not a day or two before, but a little bit earlier. Well, I think it's the night of the 25th or 26th of June. So it's the Monday, late Monday, early Tuesday of the week running up to the poisoning.
Yes.
So if we could have, please, INQ 006085, which is footage, and if we could start it at 3406, please. So just...
And the date, 25th or 26th of June?
Yes, you're looking at the date, which is at the very beginning of the footage, but the date is late at night on the 25th of June of the part that we will watch.
Thank you.
In fact, you see that date on the screen now, sir.
Mm-hmm. £11 at night.
Yes. And is this Charlie Rowley?
Yes, yes. In earlier footage, we're able to see the shirt that he's wearing as well. So, and this is him heading across Brown Street car park in the general direction of the Cloisters pub where those bins, the wheelie bins, are.
Yes, thank you. If we pause it there. In fact, this just passing interest, but the camera seems to be set at a yet another angle and scope now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
But the point is, he's certainly not wearing a coat.
No.
And if we could just go later that night, just go on to 46 minutes and 9 seconds, please. I think we will see it's actually now 1 or 2 the next morning. Yes, we see that. 2 minutes past 1. He's coming back.
Yes. And again, I believe he's coming back from those bins. But at least in the general direction from
Well,
those
he's coming
bins,
from
but
the
he's
direction of
carrying-
the bins. What's he carrying, do you think?
I would imagine items he's recovered during the process.
Well, no, don't imagine.
Well, I'm
come on.
afraid
What's it look like?
It looks like a box, sir, and then
Okay.
something larger over his shoulder.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there we are. But at least on that night, a few nights, so which is certainly well within the bracket of the sort of time he was contemplating not wearing a coat that night.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the times between those two bits of footage is about a couple of hours, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right.
Now, kind of just moving on a little, you mentioned when we were talking about where Charlie, or which bins he was in the habit of investigating, you mentioned an issue at a cordon in the days following the Skripal poisoning.
Yes.
If we could actually, sorry, if we could just go back to the graphics pack, please. So INQ 5819, and it's page 74. We were just looking at the Brown Street car park, but if we look, we will remember where the Bishop's Mill pub is, over to the left,
Yes.
and there's a reference there. You see in the white box,
Yes.
the 11th of March, Charlie Rowley tells police cordon at the Mill pub he searches bins. Is that the incident you had in mind?
Yes, it is. Yes.
And that's obviously the Mill where the Scribbles went for a drink
Yes.
before going on to ZZ's.
Yes.
If we could have on screen, please, INQ 004559. This is a witness statement from Police Constable James Osmond. Is this the constable involved in this incident, Commander?
Yeah, this officer was on the cordon, I believe so.
It's dated the 5th of September of 2018, but we can see from the first paragraph that it describes an incident on the 11th of March, which is the same date as we
Yes.
just saw, where he describes being posted with another officer at the rear of the Bishop's Mill as part of the scene preservation cordon for Operation Fairline. He describes the location, and then if we can scroll down a bit, please, the third paragraph. He says, as PC Gardner and I were sat in the vehicle, a figure approached from the car park and started walking up to the cordon. I cannot say where he'd come from before the car park. We both got out of the vehicle to the edge of the outer cordon. The male walked up to us and looked in what I would describe as a furtive manner, his head and eyes darting around, and appeared to be looking behind our vehicle. He then pushed against the barrier tape, and it looked as if he was about to duck underneath and go through. I then moved in front of him, told him he couldn't go through. In quite a curt manner, he asked why he couldn't. I said to him words to the effect of that there was clearly a barrier there and we were guarding a scene. He then asked how long it would be in place for, and I told him I didn't know. It was at this point I realised that it was Charlie Rowley. I've met Rowley several times since I've worked as a police officer in Wiltshire Police. Majority of those encounters have been with him as a suspect or bringing him back from custody. He's confident that he knows his appearance well. He goes on, Rowley then said to me words to the effect of that he didn't see why he couldn't go through. He said he always went through there and that no one had stopped him before. He said this in quite an angry manner. He looked quite annoyed. I repeated to him that he couldn't go through. He told me again that he always went through there as he would check the bins there for discarded items. I asked him to explain this and he told me that he would often find items in the bins that had some value and that he would then sell them. He explained that's how he made his living, and I was stopping him. Goes on to describe another attempt to get through, and Rowley again saying that he was stopping him from earning a living, and then he walked back into the car park muttering under his breath, and he appears to have left. But then at the paragraph below, the officer goes on, about 30 to 40 minutes later, we were relieved by the night shift, and I can recall that as PC Gardner and myself drove through the city back to Bourne Hill Police Station, we heard over the radio that Rowley had approached the cordon by ZZ's and had asked to go through there as well. And he said he thought nothing of it until July.
Yes.
But was this part of that larger picture, understanding Charlie Rowley's movements, activities and so on?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this became quite an important intervention by the officer on the basis that it just demonstrated that Charlie didn't focus purely on the Brown Street car parks there, but that as he mentioned in some of his later interviews, he obviously tried to recover items from bins in other locations around Salisbury as well.
Can you just go back to the very beginning of this statement for me, Mr. O'Connor? I'm just wondering where the cordon was.
It was at the rear of the Bishop's Mill pub, so we looked at it on the
Yes,
map.
that's good enough, thank you.
So maybe
ZZ's, of course, is just around the corner.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So I skipped over the second paragraph in the on the first page, but it may be relevant. He's describing exactly where they were, but the second line says, to the left of the bridge is a car park which is part of a loading bay to the rear of the British Heart Foundation shop. I don't know if Commander, you may not be able to help us whether there was any understanding of which bins Charlie Rowley was trying to access through the cordon, but there is at least a charity shop in play.
Yes, and there's a lot of bins actually in that particular car park. If it helps, I could show you on the map, but there's a lot of bins in that car park, and I imagine that there still are, but I visited the scene quite a few times, and there are half a dozen at least bins in that.
So if you're crossing the little bridge, and the bench where the
Yes.
scribbles were found is half right, as it were, in front of you, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
Then is the car park that is being discussed here off to the left somewhere?
it's the shop is off to the left, sir, and then the car park is just rear of the shops. There's an alleyway that allows you to go behind, and the roadway is from the opposite direction into that car park.
Thank you very much. So it's not the big public car park
No, sir.
behind Sainsbury's to the right?
No, it's a little access car park that sits right behind that little row of shops.
Yes, thank you very much.
Commander, there's one more statement I'd like to take you to on this theme of Charlie Rowley and bins. And could we go, please, to INQ 000912? We move forward. We were in March. We're now in June. And we will remind ourselves that Saturday, the 30th of June, the date of the poisoning,
Yes.
Friday, the day before, the day when we know that Dawn spent all day in Salisbury, Charlie was moving around.
Yes.
So this is a statement from someone called Nigel Pulling. We see it's dated the 12th of July. And if we look at the first paragraph, he says the statement refers to Friday, the 29th of June, 2018, when between 8:30 in the morning and 11:30 in the morning, I saw a male routing through the bins outside the main entrance to Marks and Spencer's in the old George Mall, Salisbury.
Yes.
He says he'll refer to the male routing through the bins as male 1 and a female he later interacts with as female 1. And he refers to other exhibits. He describes having parked his car and then walked around the town centre doing various bits and pieces. At some point between 8:30 and 11:30, I've entered the old George Mall from the New Canal Road and walked down towards Marks and Spencer's. Now, we looked at it on the map. It's very close to Catherine Street, is it not?
Yes.
As I get about halfway down towards Marks and Spencer's, I see male 1 routing in bin 1, which is located outside the main entrance to Marks and Spencer's. Commander, are we here dealing with the types of large wheelie bins that we were looking at in the Brown Street car parks, or do you think we are or not?
I apologise, I don't actually know. I don't think we are here because this is actually the walkway through the main part of the centre, so I believe we'll be looking at smaller bins here.
More like litter,
Yes.
sort of general litter bins rather than the large.
Yes, I believe so.
commercial bins.
Yes.
So he says, when I was roughly 20 feet from male 1, I call out to male 1 asking if he would like a cup of coffee and a sandwich. Male 1 tells me no, says he's not hungry, followed by rudely telling me to go away. I continue to walk into the mall and turn right towards the high street. Male 1 leaves bin 1 and walks to bin 2, where he begins to route through it. I've walked past male 1 as he has walked from bin 1 to bin 2. I did not see male 1 pull anything out of bin 1 or bin 2. I believe he's also routed through bins 3 and 4, but I cannot exactly recall this. Once male 1 has finished routing through bin 2, he's walked towards the high street. Male 1 is roughly 20 to 30 feet behind me at this point. At this point, I thought male 1 had a verbal interaction with female 1, who was stood outside H&M near Pepys Walk. I don't recall what was said between them. I've then continued to walk towards the high street, and I have no further knowledge of what happened with male 1 or female 1. He says he's continued with his business and returned home. He describes male 1, but says he couldn't give you any description of female 1 other than that she was white in ethnicity. He said, I've seen male 1 before in and around Salisbury town centre, and I would recognise him again if seen. Female 1, I could not say, as I did not pay much attention to her, but I have seen male 1 before in company with a female that I now know to be the female poisoned from the news called Dawn Sturgess. Having seen the news since, I believe that male one I saw rooting in the bins was Charlie Rowley. I'm 90% certain it was him. The closest point between myself and male one was when I passed him and as he walked between bins 1 and 2. It says it was roughly 20 feet. From the time I first saw male one to when I last recalled seeing him on this day was roughly 3 to 4 minutes. Visibility was good due to daylight hours, no obstructions. So I do not know male one or female one, but he repeats, but I've seen male one before in company with a female who could have been female one, but I'm not sure. So a few points about that. First of all, again, further evidence of Charlie Rowley bin dipping,
Yes.
including, we think, here, not sort of large commercial waste bins, but just general public bins
Yes.
on the face of it.
Yes.
Secondly, the date is of some interest, of course, because it's the Friday before the poisoning on the Saturday.
Yes.
In fact, this wasn't consistent with any of the accounts that Charlie gave. He didn't say, first of all, he didn't admit that he was going into sort of smaller public bins.
No.
But he doesn't give during the day on the Friday as a day when he might have found the perfume.
Yes. Correct.
The other issue around this statement is that the evidence we've heard about Dawn's movements on that Friday morning are that she remained in John Baker House for the whole morning.
Correct. I believe she didn't feel well that day. Yes.
When we were in Salisbury, we looked at various CCTV stills, which certainly show Charlie up that morning, but
Yes.
not Dawn.
Yes.
As far as that issue is concerned, how do we reconcile those with this statement?
I'm not sure this takes us much further forward with when the Novichok might have been found, but actually I think it does take us further forward with Charlie more broadly and his general activity of searching through bins in Salisbury.
I mean, on the question of the female, Mr. Pulling was quite careful to say that he
Yes.
was much more confident that the male was Charlie than that the female was Dawn. Is that,
Yes.
and it's possible that it was a different female.
Completely different person, yes.
That,
But unlikely to have been Dawn, as I believe it.
yes, and just finally, just to complete that issue, there's one further statement which we didn't go to in Salisbury, but we will look very briefly at now. If we could look, please, at INQ 000779. This is a statement of a man called Wayne Dix, who lived at John Baker House, the same building as Dawn.
Yes.
And is this right? Well, we can see in the second paragraph, Wayne Dix says that he saw Dawn in her room on Friday the 29th. He popped in for a chat. It says she was unwell, or had been unwell, possibly due to the heat. Charlie was there too, and he describes going to the cash point for Dawn with her cash card and taking out some money for her, and says that she trusts him and Charlie to do,
Yes.
and then taking the money back to Dawn. And he says Charlie was still in her front room then. He went back to his room, and later in the day, Dawn came into his room to use his phone to find out where Charlie was as he'd gone. So just in terms of that little aspect of it, it is certainly is consistent with the idea that Dawn stayed in John Baker House on the morning of Friday the 29th.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Commander, lastly, I wanted to ask you just a few more general questions then about these joint issues. Where was the bottle left? Where was it found? And so on. I was going to ask you, I will ask you, although you have in various ways answered, I think, already. By the time Charlie finished his interview, he was providing what he described as a 99% confidence account of having got the bottle from the Brown Street bins
Yes.
a few days before the 30th of June. With your Operation Caterva hat on, what level of confidence did you have in that particular account?
So I think the first thing to say, and it's really important, sir, is that I don't think we're ever actually going to know where Charlie found the Novichok. We certainly don't know explicitly where Petrov and Bosharov discarded the Novichok, sir. But I think it's unlikely Charlie found it, unless circumstances as yet undiscovered, that found that particular perfume box that late in June in those bins at the back of the charity shops, given that they had been emptied several times in that process and several times a month, and if not more regularly than that. It may be that Charlie is remembering some detail from those bins, but just the timing is not correct. But as you heard, my assessment is on the basis of Petrov and Bosharov being out on the Sunday afternoon, and Charlie being out on that Sunday afternoon. That's probably the significant point at which Charlie and Petrov and Bosharov come the closest to each other than they do at any other time during this process.
Certainly.
Yes.
Let me, could we have on screen, please, DCI Philip Murphy's statement? It's INQ 006057, page 33, please. One possible explanation, Commander Murphy, for,
yes,
on the one hand, the reasons you've said for the unlikelihood of Charlie Rowley finding the perfume in the bin that late, with the fact his account being that.
yes,
This has been somewhere else in between, so deposited somewhere,
yes,
by Petrov and Bosharov, spending some time somewhere else, and then finding its way to the bin much later.
possibly, yes.
You may recall, this is addressed at paragraph 145, that there is the suggestion that it may have become lost property and then gone to a charity shop. Of course, there might be other similar scenarios where the bottle may have spent some time in a different place and then got to the bin. Don't speculate, but first of all, let me ask you this. Were these contingencies that were considered?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the Salisbury train station one is a good one. So we followed this up following being told that there was a possibility that property was held by Salisbury railway station for up to 3 months. And if at the end of that period it wasn't claimed, if it was suitable to do so, it would go to a charity shop, for example. Actually, working with South Western Railway, we're able to identify that what happens is after several months, sometimes up to 3 months, if it's a small item of property or being opened or is damaged in any way, it's discarded, and that would include things like perfume mostly. But larger items would then return to Waterloo first, so that they could be dealt with by South Western Railway in Waterloo. So any item likely to have been left anywhere near the train station is either likely to have been discarded during that period of time in March, or some months in the intervening months, or sent to Waterloo. So unlikely in this case to have found its way into a charity shop in Salisbury. So.
Could we go on, please, to page 38 of this statement? And the bottom of that page, paragraph 163 and 164. Now, DCI Murphy is not here to give his own evidence.
Yes.
And I just want to ask you about this. I know you're familiar with the contents of these paragraphs. I won't read them out. But what DCI Phil Murphy suggests here is a different set of facts, but similar to what we've just been discussing. In other words, a possibility around the bottle having been somewhere else and then finding its way to the bins much later. The variation that he gives us here is the idea that the bottle may have been cached, to use his word, deliberately by Petrov and Bosharov, hidden somewhere. I can't remember if he actually uses the phrase dead letterbox, but it's the term that would leap to every
Yes.
schoolboy's mind.
Yes.
And with a view to it being collected later, but for whatever reason that not happening, and for it then having been found by someone, and possibly then finding its way to the bins. Again, was that a sequence of events that was considered?
So absolutely considered. It was one of many possibilities for what Petrov and Bosharov may have done. DCI Murphy, much like my assessment as to where I believe Charlie may have found the Novichok, is doing is thinking through those potential scenarios here. I should say, as the SO for Operation Caterva, I have seen no information or evidence to suggest that this is the case, but yes, of course, it absolutely remains a possibility.
Could I ask you about a slightly different document, please, which I imagine you have seen in the course of our evidence? It's INQ 004836. Thank you. This is a Department for Health document which records an interview that took place relating to the reaction to the Skripal poisoning. Have you seen this document in
Yes.
the last few weeks?
Yes.
I know you've been following the evidence.
Yes.
You've been giving most of the evidence, but the evidence that you have given, you have followed. And if we could go to page 3, please. We can see that the official, underneath the heading Public Health Response, says the possibility was considered that other caches of the agent could be present, e.g. in a discarded bottle. It was agreed to be ready for a surge medical response if more people became ill, but not to stoke panic by issuing public messages about this hypothetical scenario. An assumption was made that the assassin was acting, quote, professionally. The reason I ask you about this, Commander, is that there's that word cache seems to be coming back.
Yes.
To your knowledge, I mean, it's important to say that what is being recorded here, of course, is our considerations which followed the Skripal poisoning.
Yes.
Whereas Chief Inspector Murphy's analysis is all about looking back in light of the Amesbury poisoning
Yes.
and what Charlie may or may not have done with the bottle. But it's right to say, isn't it, that within a short time of the Skripal poisoning, the assessment had been formed that this was a Russian state action.
Yes.
And that people who may be called professionals were involved.
Yes.
As far as you're aware, did counter-terrorism police or anyone else provide any sort of reassurance to public health specialists that the assassins would be likely to have behaved professionally and left any unused poison in some sort of safe or inaccessible cache?
No. Look, it was a discussion when you talk about all the possible scenarios for where the Novichok might have been left. Clearly, there are lots of very hypothetical scenarios for what that is, based upon the fact that we didn't have any evidence. But of course, we can work on other things. But at no point was I made aware of anything that suggested, and I do think the word assumption is quite significant in that paragraph, suggesting that the assassins would have acted professionally. I've seen no suggestion of them acting in any other way than depositing, in my own view, Novichok in this way extremely recklessly.
Thank you. Well, finally then, Commander Murphy, and again, we have to some extent touched on this, but I'd like to take you to that part of your own statement which contains your own conclusions. So could we go please to INQ 006056, page 47. And we see paragraph 214.
Yes.
You say you believe it most likely that Charlie Rowley found the perfume bottle containing the Novichok on Sunday the 4th of March, it having been placed in a bin somewhere in Salisbury by Petrov and Bosharov during one of the periods when they were not captured on CCTV. Having found the perfume bottle in the bin, Charlie Rowley kept it, and as per his statement, when he saw it on the 30th of June in the kitchen, he gave it to Dawn Sturgess. And then you say in reaching this hypothesis, you've considered the following, and you set out a number of factors. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but are you able to summarise for us what it is that has led you to reaching that assessment in this case?
Yes, I suppose in examining lots of the accounts from Charlie Rowley, and I think we've talked today about those accounts, and ultimately I think we end up in a similar position towards the end. Charlie obviously believes 99% that he found it so in the Brown Street bins, but there's been lots of uncertainty in that process along the way. And of course, within the inquiry, we've managed to demonstrate, the investigation, my apologies, we've managed to demonstrate the bins were emptied on a regular basis in that area. So anything left behind, unless it had been in a safe place for a period of time before finding its way into a bin, was unlikely to have remained there for any length of time. And so in summary, with Charlie being out on the 4th of March and Petrov and Bosharov a short time before that, post the poisoning of the door, of Sergei and Yulia's door, I believe it's at that point that Charlie has found the Novichok. And his recall for the Saturday morning, as we've discussed, was quite good, actually, and he remembers it being on the table, sir. And he remembers identifying it. He's variously said it could have been on the table for some time. He's talked about days rather than any prolonged period of time, but I believe he's had it with him, sir, for that time, and given it to her on the Saturday morning.
If that's right, then yes, he had it with him for several months.
Yes.
Including the time that he moved.
And he's moved, yes.
Is that something, I mean, DCI Phil Murphy, in his statement, identifies, first of all, the unlikelihood of him moving with it, and also the fact that someone like Charlie would not have held on to something like that for so long. He would have given it away or tried to sell it.
I mean, as I say, I don't think we'll ever actually know. And the reality is there are, of course, several hypotheses for where the Novichok could have been and where Charlie could have found it. My assessment is based upon what I know about Petrov and Bosharov's movements and their activity on the day, what we've subsequently learnt about Charlie in all the time since, and obviously all the surrounding information, sir, which relates to the bins and his general movements. And but look, I think it's worth acknowledging, sir, that there are, of course, many possibilities still for where the Novichok would have been and how Charlie found it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Commander Murphy. Those are all my questions, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor. Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Straw, of course.
Would you prefer to take a break first before I ask them?
Well, sir,
Give me an idea of how long you're likely to be, Mr. Straw, because we have got some other witnesses to take this afternoon.
Yes, I'd hopefully be finished within the 15 minutes that we've been allocated.
So I did. Carry on. Yes, so sorry, it's partly my fault because I thought I would be a little longer. I said I would run up. In fact, our normal hour and 15 minutes before a break would comfortably accommodate Mr. Straw's 15 minutes before the break.
It probably would. Are you all right with that time? Let's do it while we all remember where we are, Mr. Straw.
Certainly, sir. Commander Murphy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
A few supplementary questions, please. Just to be very clear, the bins in Brown Street car park, those are accessible to the public?
Yes.
So anyone could put something in or take something out of the bins at any time?
Yes.
You discussed earlier the possibility of Charlie going to the Brown Street car park bins on the 4th of March 2018, and we saw the CCTV clips. Again, just to be completely clear, did the CCTV show Charlie actually going into the bins on that day?
No.
Okay. And was there any CCTV of him holding the Nina Ricci box on that day?
We found nothing to suggest that, no.
Moving to the later period, so 30th of June and the days leading up to that, say 4 or so days leading up to that, is it right that there was CCTV of Charlie in the vicinity of the bins on several occasions during that period?
Yes, true.
Now, we discussed the issue of it being hot during that period earlier, and whether that, and the interaction of that about Charlie's evidence that he had the box in the pocket of his coat.
Yes.
Do you recall that in one of his interviews, so it's the 1st of August 2018 interview, Charlie indicated that he generally does his bin surfing quite late?
Yes, late at night, I believe, yes.
Could we have a look, please, at INQ 005819? And it's page 112. on the, could you zoom please on the photo on the bottom left of that page? Commander Murphy, is this a still of the CCTV on the 29th of June at about 21:47?
Yes, I believe this is the time when they're leaving to get the bus to go back to Amesbury.
And does it appear there that Charlie's wearing a coat?
Yes, it looks like a grey jacket.
We earlier looked at CCTV on another night where he didn't have a coat on.
Yes.
Here he has a jacket on. Presumably, well, are you able to tell us whether on the other nights he did or didn't have a jacket on?
Not expressly, no.
You've explained your opinion earlier that it's more likely that Charlie recovered the box on the 4th of March rather than on other occasions. Could you just confirm, please, is it DCI Philip Murphy's opinion that it's unlikely that it was recovered on that day?
I don't think it's unlikely that it was, but that he preferred an alternative hypothesis, which was the cache hypothesis that you've heard.
Is it right, in paragraph 151 of his statement, he prefers the hypothesis that, well, yes, sorry, that covers the issue, thank you. So just looking at the period then between the 4th of March, when we know Petrov and Bosharov had Novichok, and the 30th of June, when Dawn had it, you mentioned earlier that one hypothesis is that the box, having been dropped by Petrov and Bosharov, was somewhere else for a period before it found its way to the bins. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions about that, please. We've heard about Bernardo's and we're going to hear about cancer research, but is it right that there were a number of other charity shops in the same part of Catherine Street as cancer research?
Yes, I believe there are, yes.
Oxfam, the hospice shop, Wiltshire site, Alabert, and so on, quite a few of them.
Yes, I think there's some others in the town as well, so yes, quite a few.
And clearly a number of other nearby private or commercial premises in that area of Salisbury.
Yes.
Can we discount the box being in any of those premises, the charity shops, the commercial, the private premises during that period?
I don't think we can discount the box being anywhere during those periods, no. I mean, we cannot evidence where the box was from the 4th of March right through to the point at which it was in Muggleton Road.
The last topic is about wrappers, Mr. O'Connor covered this on the 16th of October. We'd understood it was to be covered today. There are just two very short excerpts from Charlie's interviews, so if I may, if we can quickly read those out.
By all means, Mr. Straw.
Thank you very much. Could we have on screen, please, 3112? And it's page 65.
3112, yes.
3112, yeah.
So that's the one immediately after he's been discharged from hospital, I think. Is that right?
This is the one on the 1st of August 2018, sir. Yeah. At the top of the page, can you see there, Commander Murphy, that it says, but having a look at that, so this is the officer asking a question, but having a look at that, that's a photograph of exhibit VN555/5. Is VN555/5 one of the wrappers?
I'm not sure, actually, without checking, sorry.
No problem at all. We can read on and makes it pretty clear. So 4 lines down, the officer says, do you recognise that, to Charlie? He says, yeah, I do. That would be what contained the bottle, I believe.
Yes.
The officer then, okay, as sure as you can be out of 100%, what would you say? Charlie says 100%. 3 lines below that, the officer says, so that looks exactly like the wrapper that you took off the bottle. Charlie says, yes. And then he says, because I got the bottle and I had to saw the end off it. And the officer says, you saw the end of it. Charlie says, sawn. The officer, oh, right. And then Charlie, at the end, to get the bottle out of the casing.
Yes.
See that?
He used a kitchen knife, I believe, to then cut the bag, the cellophane wrapper open that he, in his account, yes.
And his reference to the end of the wrapper, we've heard Mr. Wilson's evidence that there was one wrapper where the shorter side was sawn. Does it appear that Charlie's referring to this, or unclear?
Quite possibly. He's definitely, by the looks of it, referring to cutting open one or other of those plastic wrappers, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And then the last document, please, 3113 this time. So this is the 8th of February 2019 interview.
Thank you.
Page 16, please. And 3 lines down from the top, Charlie says, it was just a sealed packet, so it couldn't have been used for anything else. So yeah, so I think Commander Murphy, he's back talking about the wrappers in this February interview.
Okay.
The officer says, yeah, and when you say sealed, I know you talked about how it was the contents of the box inside was sealed. Charlie says, The officer says, remind me, are we talking about the outside being sealed? Charlie, no, it was what was inside the box. Perfume bottle was sealed, so the spray part was unattached, and that was sealed as well, I believe. Almost positive that they were both sealed. I know the bottle was. Yeah, I think about the nozzle 100%. We've had other accounts that Charlie's given of this, but would you agree that here he appears to be saying the nozzle and the bottle were sealed separately?
Yes, he does appear to say that, yes.
Very much. Okay, all my questions, so
Thank you very much indeed for your help, Mr. Straw. Mr. Murphy, I gather that may be the end of your contribution.
Sir, yes, it may be.
Well, I'm very, very conscious you've had some very long stints, and indeed had to do other people's work for them. And it came on top of a very long and complicated and unusual investigation. What it all amounts to is something I've got to think about, but whatever the answer to that may be, I'm very grateful to you for your help.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Right, where do we go next, Mr. O'Connor? You'd like us back at 10 past, I expect.
Yes, sir.
10 past, please. Yes, Ms Whitehall.
Good afternoon, sir. The next witness is Mary Hodges.
Could you repeat after me? I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Lovely. Sit down.
Thank you very much, Ms Hodges. Do sit down because that's where the microphones are. The questions will come from over there.
Okay.
Mrs Hodges, thank you very much for attending to give evidence today. You should have in front of you, I think in that folder, hard copies of 2 witness statements that you gave to police. The first one dated the 29th of August 2018 is 2 pages. The inquiry reference is INQ 000818. Do you have a copy of that? Thank you. The second is dated the 1st of November 2018 is INQ 000817. Do you have a copy of that witness statement as well? If you could speak up so that we can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read through those witness statements
Yes.
before giving evidence? And can you confirm the contents are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms Hodges, the way it works is this. What matters is what you tell me today.
Okay.
You're not bound by what's in your statement, but it's a long time ago, and if you want to refresh your recollection from it, just do so.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
But speak up and speak clearly, otherwise I shall be tedious and ask you to say it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so if the evidence, the witness statements could be adduced into evidence.
Yes, please.
Please. Thank you. Could I start then with asking you about your job? In 2018, when you made your witness statement, that's in August, what was your job?
I was the shop manager for Cancer Research UK in Salisbury,
Is that the shop at 79 Catherine Street?
79 Catherine Street.
Thank you. And is that still your job?
Not in that shop, but it's still my job with Cancer Research UK.
And how long had you worked for Cancer Research UK at that time?
About 10 years.
And when did you become manager?
I don't remember the exact date that I was manager from in Salisbury shop, I'm afraid.
In your statement, it says January 2018.
Yes, that would be
have been right?
correct, yeah.
Thank you. We're going to bring up on the screen a map. It's INQ 005819, page 74, please. Do you see there in the middle of the map where it says Cancer Research Charity Shop?
Yes,
I'll make it a bit bigger. Is that the location of the shop?
yes.
Thank you. If we could go now to INQ 005262 on page 8. I think this is a Google Maps version of the same location. Does the back of the shop there open up onto the Brown Street car park?
Yes,
And at the bottom of this page, if we can go back to the document and look at the bottom of the page, thank you. Is that the shop front?
yes.
Thank you very much. We can take that down. Is it right that most items donated to the Cancer Research Shop, and we're talking about in 2018, were physically brought in?
Yes.
And could you just explain to us the process when someone brings a donation to the shop?
So we always ask if they're able and willing to gift aid their donations. And if they do, they are signed up to our gift aid scheme. That information is put onto our system and kept at our head office. So all the donors, the supporters and the donors' information is kept centrally.
So if they sign up to gift aid, then
Yes.
you have their details. Would that
Yes,
be
we
their
have
name?
their details. So their donations are kept separate from non-gift aid, and they're processed first because they represent potentially more money. So we do tend to process gift aid items before non-gift aid.
And if they're non-gift aid, you wouldn't necessarily know then the identity of the person.
No,
who brings them.
no, not at all.
And what happens to the donations then?
Well, they get we sort through the donations. So good quality saleable items go onto our shop floor, and if it's clothing and they're not really up to par, they get recycled. We have a recycling company that picks up every week what we call our rag clothing. For household items, again, if they're not up to scratch, we can't sell them, then they get put in our bins.
Could I ask you, who sorts the items? Is that any member of staff?
So it's predominantly myself, the assistant manager, but also volunteers as well. So so whoever's working that day, we all sort of do a bit of each.
And can I ask you specifically about cosmetic items, in particular perfumes? What would you do with, first of all, samples?
So samples we wouldn't be able to sell because they have been given free. So we can't charge something that was free. So they would be discarded into the bins.
And how do you tell if it's a sample or not?
Because they're normally small. So
and can you sell perfumes?
we're allowed to sell perfumes as long as it's sealed. If it's unsealed, then they're put into the bins. We can't sell them.
And when you say sealed, what do you mean by that?
So the packaging is cellophane. So most perfumes, when you buy perfume, it's sealed in cellophane. So if that is opened, then, and you can see the box has been opened, and if it's been used, then we wouldn't be allowed to sell that.
And what happens to them if they're not sealed?
So it mostly goes in the bin, but occasionally if the volunteers or staff like that perfume, they would put in a donation for it and they could take it home. But it's not often. It's not often we got really nice perfume in anyway. So.
And when you say it goes in the bin, where exactly? Which
in
bin?
our general waste bin.
And where was that?
The back of the shop. So on Brown Street car park.
How many bins were out
3.
there? And did they contain different things, or?
We had 2 that was general waste, and a smaller wheelie bin was for our recycling. And
were the 2 bins large Veolia grey bins? I think we'll have a picture of that. Could we go to INQ 004898, please? Are those the bins there?
Yes.
And is that where they were located in 2018, June 2018?
And the wheelie bin looked different, did it? Is it one of those tall ones?
Yeah, no, it was a smaller wheelie bin, but we used to keep it inside because we used to have so many people going through the bins, and that was the only one bin we could get through the gate. Okay.
And I think this is the area, isn't it, in the Brown Street car park area at the back of the charity shop?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Are you able to help us with that building? We can see the cream building on the left.
That's the pub, the Cloisters pub, which has since changed names, I think.
Thank you. And can those bins then be accessed by any member of the public?
Yeah, because even when we locked them, they would get broken into, so it was easier not to lock them in the end.
Were you aware of other premises or people putting items in those bins?
Yes.
So you said it was easy not to lock them, so they weren't generally locked.
They weren't generally locked. We did try to lock them. We tried to chain them as well to stop, people going into the bins and potentially hurting themselves, or but it was a daily occurrence that they would be going in there. So we kept them unlocked.
And going back to the perfume that you might throw away if it wasn't completely sealed, would that be loose, or would it be put into any other kind of packaging?
It would probably go into a bin liner first, because we're not going to go from the shop out all the way back with each item of rubbish. So, we've got bins inside the shop, so then it would be taken out into bin bags.
And prior to the end of June 2018, had you yourself seen people, that's members of the public, going through the bins?
We do see people going through the bins quite often, yes.
So at that time, in 2018, you had seen people go through the bins?
Yes, yeah.
You said quite often. In your statement, you refer to it being a daily occurrence.
It is. It is. It would generally be I'd come in the morning and all the rubbish would be all over the floor, where they'd just chuck it out of the bins. But there has been several occasions where, you know, I've come out to put something in the bin and people are going through the bins. We've asked them not to, asked them to leave the bins alone.
And how often were those bins emptied?
3 times a week.
Was that on particular days?
It was. I'm pretty sure, but it's Monday, Thursday, Saturday, or Monday, Wednesday, Saturday.
In your statement, you say Monday, Wednesday, Saturday.
Yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Yes.
And who would empty those bins?
The people from Veolia, or the council waste disposal. I'm not sure. It was Veolia, I think. Our contract was with then.
And if you need to refer to your statement, I'm at page 2 of your first statement. But what can you tell us about any perfume that you received in the months prior to giving your witness statement?
So we had received some Elizabeth Arden. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, we had received a few bottles of I'm not sure, it was Bluegrass, and I know we had, because they were sealed, so we had sold one. And like when we got a lot of Next perfumes and things. I don't remember. No, so I don't remember seeing anything out of the ordinary with any perfumes or unusual packaging.
And you indicate in your statement that you particularly liked perfume and you were always interested in what.
Yeah, I love perfume. It's my most favourite thing.
So you think you might have remembered if there was anything
I think I would have remembered it. Yeah, I'm 99.9%. I would have remembered seeing it.
And when you say seeing it, do you mean the box of perfume, which I think the police showed you a picture of?
Yes, I didn't know. I didn't get to see that picture for months after, actually. So I would have seen that. I would have known that brand of perfume, and yeah, I would have seen that if it had come through the shop.
So before you saw the photograph, had they told you what
No.
brand it was?
No.
They hadn't.
Could you just tell us, similarly, you talked about receiving Elizabeth Arden perfumes. Had you received sample perfumes prior to?
Yes,
2018?
we'd had a few, the little samples that are on a card, you know, like they're on a card and they're little tiny things with a wand in that, you know, they're free samples out of magazines and things, or, you know, off Boots counter or something.
And what happened to those?
We threw those away.
Now we'll go. It's your second statement made on the 1st of November 2018 that explains that a police officer, VN118, showed you a picture of the Nina Ricci perfume packaging, and we'll go to that. It's INQ 004487. There should be 3 photographs in a row here for you to look at on the screen. Could we go to the next photograph in the document? Thank you, and the next one, please. Thank you. Do you recall if that's the box you were shown?
Yes.
And you didn't recall, and you don't recall now ever seeing it before?
No. Yeah, it looked different, actually, I think. Sorry. The one I saw, I think. It must be the photo, but I don't remember seeing that at all, no.
What do you remember now?
I don't remember seeing any Nina Ricci perfume. I saw the photo. Sorry,
No,
yeah.
she's asking about, and indeed I'd like to know about when the policeman came.
Oh, when?
No. What did they show you?
Oh, they showed me, that picture.
This picture?
I think so, yeah.
That's all right then.
So you remember seeing this picture when the police showed it to you, but you hadn't seen this at any time before you were shown the picture?
No.
And you said in your second witness statement that you were always the first one to try perfume handled in the store, so you thought you would normally remember. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think everyone I work with know I like perfume, so...
Did you have regular working days at that time, do you recall?
My day off would change, but I was 5 days a week.
And if you weren't there, who would be working in your
Jacqueline,
place?
my assistant manager.
Jacqueline
Gerd.
Thank you. I'm going to take you to 2 witness statements, but I'll start with one from, I think, another colleague, Debbie Jedd. Was that a colleague of yours?
Debbie was one of our volunteers.
Volunteer. The statement's INQ 000824. Do you know if you've seen this statement before?
I have, yes.
It's dated the 19th of September 2018, and she says, this statement refers to my employment at the Cancer Research Shop in Salisbury. I've been working at this store for approximately 15 months as a shop assistant volunteer. DCVN 324 has shown me the photograph of the Nina Ricci perfume box. I've not seen this at any point in this shop. I've seen that image on the news recently. All tester bottles of perfume and opened bottles would always be put straight into the metal bin at the back of the shop. Only bottles in the original sealed packaging would be sold in the store. So do you agree with that?
Yes.
Thank you. And she goes on to say, I do remember in June, probably Wednesday the 6th or Friday the 8th of June, about midday, I saw a woman who I now know to be Dawn Sturgess rummaging through the metal shop bin at the back. I was with the manager, Mary Hodges, and she asked Dawn to leave. Dawn did so. I do not believe Dawn had taken any items from the bin. I had seen Dawn on numerous occasions going through our bin and others along the car park. She also used to sit and drink and ask for money. I cannot remember what Dawn was wearing that day, but she was on her own. Do you recall that?
No, I don't remember it, I'm afraid.
Do you remember any occasions on which you would have asked people to leave?
Several occasions, yes.
And did you know Dawn Sturgess at all?
No, but again, when seeing her on the news, I recognised her. I've recognised her from Salisbury and from around the bins.
Sorry, when you saw her photograph on the news,
Yes,
I suppose,
yeah.
yes, you recognised her from where?
From sort of being in Salisbury, around Salisbury and around Brown Street car park.
And did you say Anne from the bin?
And from the bins, yeah. I do recognise her being in our bins, but I don't remember that exact time.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Thank you. We could take that down. If we could now go to INQ 000806. This is a short statement of Jacqueline Gerd, whom you've mentioned, dated the 18th of September 2018. She describes herself as a cover manager. Was that right?
She was more than a cover manager. She was our assistant manager at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So someone who worked in the shop when you weren't there. Did she
And
work
with me,
you?
yes.
And with you, thank you. Did you have any other members of staff working at the shop, or was it just the three of you?
I think it was. Who's the third one?
Debbie Jed. Who?
No, Debbie was a volunteer. There was 2 paid members of staff and various other volunteers.
Did the 2 include you and Jacqueline Gerd?
The 2 paid staff?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We see from paragraph 2 that she says she worked in this shop until about the end of February 2018 and then left to go on holiday, which was for about 12 weeks. She says she returned to work in the shop on the 4th of May. So it looks like she wasn't working between the 5th of March and the 4th of May. Does that accord with your recollection?
Yeah, she went to I think she went to Australia to visit her family, I think.
End of February.
And she continues, on Tuesday, the 18th of September, police requested I look at a picture of Premier Jour Nina Ricci perfume, police exhibit VN 5213. I can confirm that I've not seen this item before and have never had any contact with it. I'll just bring up that photograph, which is INQ 004672. That's another photo, but again, the same box. Does that look like the box the police showed you the photograph of? Could you just finally tell us, if you had received a box like that into the shop, what would you have expected would happen to it?
Well, if it was sealed, it would have been priced up and put on the shop floor for sale.
What if it had been like this?
If it had been like that, it would have been put in the bin.
Thank you very much. Those are all my questions for you. I don't know if there are just one more. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Stroll.
Ms. Hodges, I have asked questions on behalf of the family, Dawn Sturgess. Just one question. Did you have, at the time, so March to June 2018, did in the Cancer Research Shop you have a comprehensive register of all of the items that came into the shop and were thrown out?
No.
Thanks very much.
Ms. Hodges, thank you very much indeed. Those are all those are all the questions. There's no need to stay unless, of course, you want to, but there's absolutely no need. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you.
So the next witness is Martin Litherland.
Yes. Just stand up if you would for a moment, Mr. Litherland. I'd like you to take the oath. Still, please.
Yes.
After me, please. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give
the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Litherland. Please sit down now and speak to the microphones.
Could you give us your full name, please?
My name is Martin Litherland.
Mr. Litherland, thank you for coming to give evidence this afternoon. We'll hear a bit about your career in a moment, but it's right to say you're an employee of Wiltshire County Council,
I am.
and you have come this afternoon to provide the inquiry with a baseline understanding of waste collection in and around Salisbury in 2018, who was responsible for it, how frequent the collections were, and so on.
Yes, that's correct.
And you have provided the inquiry helpfully with a witness statement. Perhaps we could have it on screen, please. It's INQ 005164. Is that your statement, Mr. Litherland?
It is.
And have you had a chance? Well, let's just go. We can see at the first page it's dated the 11th of April of this year. If we can go to the last page, please, page 10. There is a DPA redaction, but underneath that, Mr. Litherland, may we take it that you signed that statement on the 11th of April?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Have you had a chance to review it in the last few days prior to giving evidence?
I have.
I believe there is one small correction that you wish to make twice to the witness statement.
Yes, that's correct.
And if we could go to page 6 of your statement, please. The bottom half. We can see that at both paragraphs 14 and 15, you refer to a date on which the council transferred the provision of household waste collection to a private company. I think the date that you've included there is out very slightly.
Yes, correct. That should have read the 30th of July 2018.
Yes, thank you very much.
It's a day out, is it?
It's a day out, yes.
All right, we'll manage. Thank you.
But with that correction having been made, Mr. Litherland, are you content that the contents of this statement are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I am.
Thank you.
Mr. Litherland, you probably heard me say the same thing to the last witness. Use it as a refreshment, a way of refreshing your recollection if you need to, or for any documentary assistance you need, but what matters is what you can tell me now.
Understood.
Grateful. If we could go back to the first page of the statement, please. We can see at paragraph 1, Mr. Litherland, you have provided us with a helpful resume of your experience. Is it right to say that you are currently Head of Service for Waste Management for Wiltshire Council?
Yes, that's correct.
And I won't go through your various roles, but is it a fair summary that you have worked for Wiltshire Council in a variety of roles relating to waste management for nearly 20 years?
I have, yeah.
Thank you. Now, we will go through various parts of your statement, Mr. Litherland. Is it right to say that in broad terms, what you address are three different categories of waste disposal. First of all, household waste. Yes?
Yes.
Which itself, as we'll see, divides itself into general waste on the one hand and recycling on the other.
That's correct.
And in summary, is it fair to say that Wiltshire Council was responsible for that waste disposal during the period that the inquiry is interested in?
Yes, that's correct.
That's up until the 30th of July, is it?
Up until the 30th of July,
Yep.
After which point we were
Don't worry
still
about afterwards.
statutorily responsible, but the contractors did it on our behalf.
Indeed. And those were the paragraphs we just looked at.
Yeah.
Second of the three categories, commercial waste. And will we hear that Wiltshire did provide some commercial waste services, but in fact that itself ceased on the 31st of March 2018. So
That's correct.
within the March to July period that you've been asked to address.
Yeah.
And then finally, by way of summary, public litter bins, we'll see there's a part of your statement where you say that that was not, never has been part of your county council responsibilities. That's something that is addressed by the city council.
That's correct, yeah.
So starting, if we may, please, with the household waste. If we go to page 3 of your witness statement, that there is a chart here which addresses the position, as we've said, from March 2018 up to the 30th of July 2018. And we can see in the left-hand column, first of all, there's a reference to general waste. And if we scroll down, household recycling in terms of plastic bottles, cardboard, and if we could go over to the next page, please, the other household recycling, so glass bottles, jars, paper, cans, and so on. And do we see, we've gone through it, but on the first entry in the middle column for each of those categories, that the routine was, during the period in question, for Wiltshire Council itself to provide fortnightly scheduled collection for each of those categories of waste?
Yes. Standard service was a fortnightly collection of waste from those receptacles, with residents advised to place those receptacles out for collection at 7 a.m. on the scheduled day.
Yes. And if we could go forward, please, to page 6 of your statement. You have explained, we see at paragraph 11 at the very top, this exercise of collecting these different categories of waste was undertaken by a fleet of 26 vehicles. And then at paragraph 12, you have referred to a large number of appendices to your statement which break down the collections by reference to different areas, those, and also those different categories of waste collection within the period March to July that you were asked to address. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you also make the point, and this is just at the very end of paragraph 12, that those schedules, and we'll look at one or two of them in a moment, what they detail is the intended dates of collection. We're all probably familiar, no doubt it happens almost never in Salisbury or Wiltshire, but we are all familiar, of course, with times when collections aren't made for whatever reason. I think, yes, this is really what you address at paragraph 13, but on those occasions, follow-up collections would have been undertaken, but you aren't in a position to provide us with that level of detail now.
Yes, I think I've mentioned elsewhere in the statement, I think there was an incident towards the start of March 2018 where there was some severe winter weather. Those kind of situations, or vehicle breakdowns more typically, may have resulted in some delays to some collections. And in those circumstances, crews would repeatedly attempt to recover those collections, normally successfully within a matter of days.
Yes. No doubt if we had asked for this information nearer to the time, you might have been able to give us that extra detail, but we will bear in mind, and this is right, is it, that when we look at the schedules, the dates we see then are the intended dates. You're not able to help whether any of those dates were missed, and if so, when the catch-up.
Yeah, absolutely right. Those schedules are indicative, and we have no informational data retained by the council that confirms whether or not those schedules were completed as intended.
Yes. Well, just as I say, we're not I'm sure everyone will be relieved at 20 to 4, but we're not going to go through all of the schedules, but just to get an idea so that we have an understanding, if we could go, please, to INQ 005198. This is, we'll see from the top, it's a general waste schedule, household residual waste, yeah? Yes? So not recycling.
Yeah, residual waste collections, yes.
And this is, these schedules, as I think I mentioned, they're specific to the type of waste, but then also to the particular area involved.
Yes, that's correct.
And this is an area which includes some of the roads with which we have been particularly interested. So if we look down the list, we can see, for example, Christie Miller Road. Yes?
Yes.
And Devizes Road, various sections of Devizes Road, which we know to be a long road. And if we could carry on scrolling down, please, and probably onto the next page, we see Highbury Avenue, again a road with which we have become familiar, Macklin Road, and also Montgomery Gardens. And so if we could just scroll up just a little, please. So if we then look on the right-hand side, we see the scheduled collection dates, and as you will be aware, we have a particular interest in the 4th of March, the date of the Skripal poisoning, and so we will see, is this right, that the first scheduled collection date of general waste after that date was the 6th of March, the Tuesday, the 6th of March 2018.
Yeah, that's correct.
Just two more examples, if we may. First of all, INQ 005195. Again, a general waste schedule. Yes?
Correct, yeah.
On this occasion, we can see there are entries for Fisherton Street, a road or a street with which, about which we've heard a fair amount of evidence. Also, if we scroll down, please. Yes, do you see Water Lane there? Another of the roads.
Very broadly speaking, Mr. Litherland, that last list looks as if it's basically central town, and the other one looked to be rather more outside.
I think that's correct. I guess the thing to acknowledge is that we would have been collecting from about 26,000 households across the area that was served by that depot.
Okay.
And as we've suggested, with 26 different vehicles engaged in that undertaking, it's difficult to isolate to central to maybe more suburban areas of Salisbury.
Right, thank you very much indeed.
Is it as simple as saying that each of these schedules reflects a round for a particular vehicle on a particular day?
Absolutely correct, yes.
Oh, I see. Right.
We know, of course, that Water Lane goes off Fisherton Street. So if we could scroll back up to the top of the page, please, and then doing that exercise we did previously. So the first date on which the bins for these properties would have been collected after the 4th of March would have been the 14th of March.
That's correct, yeah.
And then lastly, if we could go to INQ 005168. Thank you. Again, so just to be clear, and again, like the earlier two, this is household residual waste rather than recycling.
Yes, correct.
And we can see that the streets here are actually right in the middle of Salisbury. So if we scroll down, we can see it's the Brown Street. We've heard evidence about the car park, Catherine Street. And if we go even further down, quite some way, yes, there's Catherine Street. Yes, if we go even further down, I think it may be a couple of pages. Going. It's a T. Yes. So we see there the Maltings
Yes,
shopping centre.
correct.
And so on this round, could we go up, just scroll up a little bit and we'll see the date. The first collection after the 4th of March, the 14th of March.
That's
So
correct.
that's how it works. And you have very helpfully provided us with many more appendices than these. And so if for any reason we want to establish the first scheduled date of a particular street or area, we can do it that way.
Correct.
And there are also schedules which deal with recycling, and those won't necessarily be the same dates for the same streets. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
So that is the question of household waste. If I could move then to the question of commercial waste, and for that, if we could go back to your witness statement, so it's INQ 005164, thank you, page 7. And paragraph 19 of your witness statement, so if we could scroll up a little, please. Thank you. And having you give us some detail about the statutory underpinning of commercial waste services, you explain that you offered a chargeable service for the collection and disposal of commercial waste up to the 31st of March. But you were not the only undertaker, as it were, that offered that service.
Yes, absolutely. The council offered those services in competition with the private sector, and there were several companies active in that area, and I understand that Veolia were one of those. And basically, as a waste producer, a business premises had the choice to select the best price and the best level of service that reflected their requirements, and the council was just one of those providers.
Yes. And we can take it that after the council finished providing those services at the end of March, then it was only those private companies to which those companies will.
That is
and so on
correct.
could
Yep.
turn. And then at paragraph 20, again in terms of the frequency of collections, you indicate that for those, for your customers, for that commercial waste service during March, which is the only time that you were still doing it, that's of interest to the inquiry, you say daily collections or weekly collection was most common. You say there were some that were less frequent than that, but most were daily or weekly.
Yes, I mean, I think such as the character of the city centre of Salisbury, most of those businesses have very limited external space or internal space, even where they could store this material. So given that we operated services from a city centre depot, we were able to provide those daily services.
Yes, and if we could look, please, at INQ 005165. This is another of your appendices. Yes, and does this set out it's a list of those businesses who were your customers during March 2018 for commercial waste. And if we just look over towards the right, we can get a pretty clear understanding, can we, of the frequency of collections at those individual places.
Yep, that's correct. And the majority look to be receiving a daily collection during the working week.
Yeah. So just to be clear, if there's a line that says weekly against every single day, that in effect means it's a weekly collection.
It is
every Monday.
Every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, if
So
if those columns are completed. Yes.
A row of weeklies amounts to daily.
Daily. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, I see.
Thank you. So again, that will provide us with the information should we need it, but you've made the point. There were other commercial providers, and we will be hearing from a witness from Veolia about the particular bins about which we've heard evidence today. And then the third category that I mentioned right at the start, the public litter bins. Could we just go back to your witness statement, please? So INQ 005164 and go to page 9. And can you tell us in your own words what the position was regarding public litter bins within the City of Salisbury?
Yes, certainly. So bearing in mind this was not a service I've been responsible for, but in my research with colleagues, my understanding is that Wiltshire Council had responsibility for emptying of litter bins in the SP1 and SP2 postcodes where they existed outside of the Salisbury City parish boundary. So Salisbury City Council were responsible for the litter bins within the parish boundary. If there were litter bins outside of that parish boundary that fell into SP1 and SP2 postcode areas, Wiltshire Council would have emptied those, or rather its contractor, ID Verdi, would have emptied those on behalf of the council. Colleagues have been unable to provide me with records that would confirm the frequency of collecting or emptying of litter bins that fell into those areas. It would have likely to have been on a daily basis or several times a week.
And as far as the Salisbury City parish boundary is concerned, can we take it that that equates to what we would all understand as the centre of Salisbury?
That is my understanding too, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Levan, thank you. Those are all my questions. So I don't believe there are any further questions.
Nothing from you, Mr. Straw? No. Mr. Litherland, thank you very much indeed for your help. That's those are all the questions. There's no need to stay unless you want to, though. Feel free to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your help.
And so the last witness is Adam Wiley.
Thank you.
Repeat after me, please. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wiley. Do sit down, address yourself to the microphones, and remember what you've just heard me say to everybody else.
Can you give us your full name, please?
Adam Wiley.
Mr. Wiley, thank you for coming to give evidence this afternoon. You will understand that we simply require your assistance on a narrow factual issue relating to waste collection of some particular bins in Salisbury back in 2018. You have provided the inquiry with a witness statement, INQ 005334. You have it on screen, please. We see the top right-hand corner, the date, the 31st of May of this year. If we could go forward to the last page of the statement, page 6, please. Again, your signature has been covered by a redaction, but may we take it that you signed that statement on the 31st of May of this year?
Yeah, that's correct.
Have you had a chance to review it before coming here this afternoon?
Yes.
And are the contents of the statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yep.
Thank you. If we look at paragraph 1 of your statement, you are currently the Managing Director of Commercial Waste Collection, or the Collections Business of Veolia UK Limited.
Yes.
And again, you provide some detail, but in summary, you have worked with Veolia for 16 years or so.
That's correct.
And we can see at paragraph 2 that this statement was provided in response to a request from the inquiry to provide details of waste collections in the Salisbury area during the period 1st of March 2018 to the end of July of the same year.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you will understand, Mr. Wiley, that the inquiry's attention has been focused on two particular bins that were located in the Brown Street car park in 2018. If we could have on screen, please, INQ 003120. If we could look on the, if we could zoom in on the right-hand photograph, please. Mr. Wiley, I don't know if you were here this morning, but we looked at this document this morning. This, in fact, is a couple of photographs that were taken by the police in 2018 in relation to interviewing Charlie Rowley. But it's similar to other photographs we've seen. We can see two Veolia bins there behind the back of Catherine Street Cancer Research Stall.
Were you, in fact, here while we've been talking about these?
I wasn't.
No, that's
I
all right,
arrived
don't
this
worry.
afternoon.
There's absolutely no need to be. I just wondered. Cool.
I know you're not a resident of Salisbury, not sort of familiar in that sense with this area, but are you familiar with that address, and do you understand it was one of your customers?
Yes, I do.
We'll come back to this, but we've heard this afternoon that there may actually have been 3 bins, that Veolia bins, that were, as it were, in play at the Cancer Research Shop. These 2 larger bins and then a smaller one. Is that something you're familiar with, according to your records, or not?
In terms of quantity, I'm not familiar. What I do know is that there were collections for non-hazardous, general waste and recycling.
All right, and we'll come to look at those in a moment and the records that you have. Last question just about this. We'll see in the documents that we come to a reference to something called euros. What are euros?
Euros are the type of containers. So the containers you see on screen are Euro 1100 litre bins.
All right.
Euro like the money?
Euro like the money, yes.
I'm sure we're all, not just through having looked at photographs like this in this case, but that they are a standard large commercial waste bin.
Yeah, these are the most common size containers that commercial customers have.
And they're so known as a sort of shorthand as a euro.
As a euro, yeah.
All right. Can we go back to your witness statement, please? So 5334, page 2. And you summarise, you list at the top of the page various different categories of waste that might be collected. Is that right?
Yes.
Non-hazardous waste, we've heard various descriptions, but is that sort of another phrase for just general waste?
General non-recycling material, yeah.
And then various, is this right, various categories of recyclable material?
Yeah, so recycler is generally mixed recycling, and then you have your separate streams, cardboard, glass and food.
Yeah. And then if we cast our eye down to that table, it appears that most of the containers that were in play in Salisbury during this period were indeed euros of the type we've just looked at.
Yes, which is very common.
And of those, most were for either the non-hazardous industrial or just what you've described as mixed recycling, recyclate.
Yes.
And if we can go on to page 3 of your statement, please. You indicate at paragraph 8 that you have provided the inquiry with, or rather you mentioned this at paragraph 7 and paragraph 8, is a schedule which provides detail for all the customers you had in the Salisbury area, all the collections and so on that were made during the period that we saw at paragraph 2.
Yes.
That's a very lengthy schedule, which we'll, the inquiry has, and we may need to go to it, but for today's purposes, we can focus our energies more narrowly. And if we can go on to page 4 of your statement, please. You refer to a shorter exhibit, exhibit AW2. This is at the bottom of the page, on paragraph 12, please, which lists all the collections in Catherine Street during the period. Again, it's a relatively lengthy exhibit, but you draw attention at the top of the next page to a series of particular customers, Cancer Research, Hills Waste, Bernardo's and Vision Plus. Just looking at Cancer Research UK, can you explain what, according to the records, what the position was, what was being collected, how often, the size of the bins and so on?
So our records show that for Cancer Research at 79 Catherine Street, we were contracted to collect a Euro bin for general waste, non-hazardous, on a Monday and Wednesday every week, and dry mix recycling, which in records earlier is under Recycler, on a Friday every week.
And that's all?
For Cancer Research, yes. Yeah.
So twice a week for the general and once a week for the recycling. Is that it?
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't know whether you were in court. Two witnesses before, Ms Hodges, who gave evidence from the shop, she mentioned that there were, as well as those two bins we've looked at, and we'll see again in a moment, a third bin they had, which they kept sort of inside, or at least away from the car park. Is it a fair summary of your evidence that they may well have done, but as far as you were concerned, you were emptying 2 Euros, one of them twice a week and one of them once a week?
From the pictures that you showed me earlier, the two 1,100 litre bins look like non-hazardous. So it may be that the mixed recycling was the other bin that they're referring to, but our records don't state the quantity of each container.
I see. So let's have it. You refer, we can see at paragraph 14, you do refer to your own exhibit, AW4, showing grey waste containers. Importantly, you make the point at the end of the sentence that you're not personally familiar with the area. But let's look at that photograph, please. It's INQ 005333. So this is your exhibit. It's very similar view to the photograph taken by the police. So help us, Mr. Wiley, there's little may turn on this, but we've seen that your records refer to a Euro of general waste being collected twice a week and also a Euro of recyclate and being collected once a week. Mm-hmm. How does that tally with that photograph?
In the photograph, I can see 2 1,100 litre bins with grey lids. Non-hazardous containers will have grey lids. Our mixed recycling typically have orange lids, so we'll be able to determine, and that's to provide the driver and the customer to be able to distinguish between recyclate and non-hazardous. So the containers I can see there look like non-hazardous, but I can't confirm if both of them relate to Cancer Research.
I see. As far as you were concerned, you were emptying one of them twice a week?
Yes.
I think that may be as far as we can take that little facet of the evidence. Could we go back, please, to your witness statement? So INQ 005334. Page 5. And we see paragraph 16 there, it's just a short paragraph. You say the Euro container is lockable and can be locked by customers. What's your experience of whether bins such as these are locked? Is there a requirement that you put on customers to lock them or not?
Each Euro 1100 has a universal triangular lock. But it is a universal lock, and that's to allow our drivers and the customer to gain access. But we do expect our customers to take responsibility for ensuring that they're locked. Our drivers' responsibility is to turn up to site. They'll check the contents of the container, empty and return the container. They will lock them after, but it is a universal lock.
And do you mean by that that it's not a particularly secure lock because, what is it, many people have keys to it, or it's easy to open?
Yeah, it's a secure lock, but you know, the key that you use to open it is a universal one. So other customers would also have a similar type lock as well.
And is there anything you can say about how frequently or otherwise you find people do in fact lock these bins or leave them open, or is there a complete variety of
It'd be difficult for me to say.
All right. Well then, if we can look at paragraph 13 of your witness statement, you describe a third, more precise exhibit, which focuses solely on the collections carried out at this particular shop during the period in question. That's AW3, yes?
Yes.
And so if we could look at that, please. It's INQ 005332. And if we could focus in on the top sort of, I think maybe 10 lines would be sufficient. Now, Sir Wiley, as you're probably aware, the starting point as far as this inquiry is concerned is the date of Sunday, the 4th of March, and the possibility is that something may have been placed in one or other of those bins on that day. And so the question for us is when those bins were emptied after that time. And do we see then going down that the dates aren't all in exact order, but as far as the non-hazardous waste is concerned, that appears to have been emptied on Tuesday, the 6th of March. In fact, the first line. Is that right?
That's correct.
There were then other non-hazardous collections we can see in the lines immediately under that, 7th, 12th, and 14th. And then do we see that there was a recyclate collection on the 2nd of March, so the Friday before the weekend with the 4th of
That's
March?
correct.
Do you see that? And then the collection, the next collection of recyclate, so that following the 4th of March, appears to have been the 9th of March.
Yes.
And just going back to that question we were looking at, the best you can tell us is that you would not assume that one of those bins was recycling and one was non-hazardous waste, because they both look like non-hazardous waste to you.
Yes.
So you would have expected a recyclate collection to have been of a bin with an orange top.
Typically, when we deliver the containers, to distinguish between the two, it's an orange lidded container. So that's what I'd expect to see.
But in any event, as far as your records show, the regular collections of both types of waste that were being conducted of the bins of that shop had all been undertaken at least once by Friday the 9th of March.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
In that column, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 from the right, where it says either non-hazardous or recyclate, next to non-hazardous is what might be an L or might be a 1 or might just be a smudge. Do you know what it is?
Do you mind, could someone highlight that for me? Sorry.
Well, the top line will do. Non-hazardous.
Oh, so that would be an I in non-hazardous industrial.
Ah. So it's not a number.
It's not a number, no.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wiley, thank you. So those are all my questions for Mr. Wiley.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Wiley, thank you very much for your help. We needed the evidence. There's no need to stay unless you have to, unless you want to.
So just for completeness, there's one further statement I was going to ask you to look at.
Mm-hmm.
It's a statement of Mr. Mark Reed. It's INQ 005663.
Thank you. Is he REID or READ?
READ.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's 5663. Yes, thank you. So you will recall from Mr. Litherland's evidence that the question of the emptying of the public bins within the centre of the city was left unanswered. And this is a statement from Mr. Reid, who addresses that issue.
So he's the city council, is he?
So yes.
Yep.
He doesn't actually. Yes, you can see that in the black type at the header. He says, "I'm providing a witness statement on behalf of Salisbury City Council, which addresses the following matters."
Yes.
His answers are given in red, so I won't read it all out. You'll see that he acknowledges at the beginning that all bins were the responsibility of Salisbury City Council. There is then some detail about the extent to which they emptied the bins using their own staff, on the one hand, or using contractors on the other. But if we just really, the key point is at paragraph 2, that is the frequency of collection.
Yes.
And we can see, if we go to the top of the next page, the schedule for bins directly emptied by our grounds team during the summer, that is April to October, was daily emptying, and during the winter, 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And city centre bins, minimum of once a day.
They're all the time, right.
So that completes the evidence for today.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's today, is it?
It is.
And am I right, Mr. O'Connor, that for good reason we next meet on Thursday?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Thursday, 10 o'clock?
Yes.
At which level?
Level 1, sir.
Good. Thank you very much. Thursday, 10 o'clock then, please, level 1. Thank you for your help.